Good morning, grade 9. We are now going to have the last topic for the first quarter, and that is on sonnets. This is a topic that's quite close to my preference, close to my heart, because I've learned to love sonnets so much. I've read a lot of them. I've read quite a number of them, and there are just so many things that we can also learn from them. There are so many themes that can be created in any structure of a sonnet. Plus, we have a name in literature that has really become so popular because this person has created a total of 154 sonnets in his lifetime. So we have no other than the name of William Shakespeare. Other than his famous works of Romeo and Juliet and all of his other plays, his name has come to be a great contributor in the field of sonnet writing for world literature. In fact, many experts believe that his name stands as a proponent in the field of poetry of sonnet writing. For that, he has been given one kind of sonnet has been attributed to his name. One type of sonnet has been named after him. So anyway, we'll go into these details later on. But we are going to focus first on the selection that we have. It's entitled Sonnet 29 by George Santayana. If you find sonnets entitled with a number, then you should of course expect that that author has an array, has a list of sonnets in his disposal, in his list of creations. I mean, just imagine William Shakespeare, if his total number of sonnets reached 154, so that means that he had sonnet 1, 2, 24, 15, and all of these are readily available for reading for the people of today to continue reading. So we have Sonnet 29 of George Santayana. Allow me to read it for you, but of course, this is not the only way by which this selection is going to be read. You can read it later on at your own style, but let's be reminded of this is something that I'd like to remind your classmates. Poetry reading has been, I think you've done poetry reading 4 or 5 times already. And I still don't understand why, yes, I really don't understand why not just a few, but majority of you read it with no life at all. So many of you read it this way. What riches have you that you deem me poor? Or what large comfort that you call me sad? Tell me what makes you so exceeding glad. Is your earth happy or your heaven short? I don't know why many of you read it that way. If you are so guilty of that, and yes, you should be guilty of that, please do away with that style because that style is the reason why you've been getting a low score in our poetry reading. You have very few, yes, there are just a few who stand out in reading the lines so well. I appreciate what others have done, the effort of others to put in some emotions, expressions in their faces, inflections with their voices, in the way they're reading the lines. Especially that we are dealing with poetry here. We are not simply approaching this as any reading material. We are approaching this material in poetry. And you should be reminded I can't emphasize it enough. You should be reminded that lines in poetry are to be treated differently as how you treat lines in prose. I think it's fair. I think it's fair enough that I should demand. Okay, I'll demand this time. If you cannot read it properly, I will not download your file, which means which means that you will not be scored at all. That's fair enough. I'm making it official to your class. If you read it blandly, if you read it with no emotions, if you read it like you're reading a regular sentence as the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I will not download your file, nor will it be scored until such time that the grades are to be released. If you cannot give me a well-read version of Sonnet 29, you will not have any score for your work. So many of the ones who are part of this call, you can see the names of 15 students. So many of the students part of this call failed to do poetry reading. And don't give me the reason, sir, that's just how I read. No, hell no, you forget that style that you thought is correct. Sir, I can't. No, hell no, you are expressive. When you're at home, you have the capacity to get mad. You have the capacity, whenever, wherever you are, you have the capacity to be happy. You have the capacity to be emotional. You are just choosing to contain yourself inside your box. That when it comes to poetry reading, you choose not to express. So let's put it this way. Again, if your work cannot be scored, if your work will not be downloaded, it's your fault that you are reading it poorly. If only you have not been told how to read it properly, then perhaps I could make some considerations. But this is not the first poem that you will have read in our class. As you did it for, just imagine a psalm of life. A psalm of life is filled with so much finesse in terms of how it's going to be read. But it felt so unfair that many of you read it as, tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. What kind of reading is that? I tell you, if this were in a regular classroom, I would have told you to take your seat right away. Honestly, I've done that before where students who did not give justice to the selection were just told to take their seats. I mean, why will I waste my time listening to someone who did not give any justice to the selection at all when he or she has already been reminded to do that? I'm sparing this portion of our discussion for this amount of time for this reminder because it's really frustrating. I tell you, it's really frustrating to keep on reminding you to read poetry well, to do poetry reading well. However, so many have not given justice to it. Vem, would you allow me, Vem, to mention your name? Vem has not failed to impress me when it comes to poetry reading. I tell you that. She has never failed me in the many poetry reading activities that she had submitted or performed. She did not hesitate but it does not mean that Vem had to cry. Di ba, Vem, recall, you didn't cry in any of the performances. She did not. All that she did was to do an elaborate way to read the selection. An elaborate reading is one that the material requires. It's one that the material needs. You don't have to I'm not asking you to do an exaggerated reading. I'm asking you to do an elaborate poetry reading. Others tried to do, what riches have you that you deem me poor, or what large comfort that you call me sad? Your voice is the one that's only doing it. It's not elaborate yet, because when your voice does its inflection, your face should show the intention behind that inflection in the voice. What do I mean by inflections, voice inflections? I'm pertaining to when you try to make your voice sound happy, the face should show it. When your voice tries to sound sad or angry, your voice should also show it. If there's a mismatch, that means that there's something wrong with your reading. And let's face it, the problem is with you. I have to be blunt with this. The problem is with you because you're choosing to do it in your style, which, allow me to be honest, is really wrong. Your style is really wrong. Your phrases do not and a quick segue. I asked you to do the speech in debate, right? The delivery of the speech. One great requirement there was that you should deliver it in a convincing manner, in a manner that could persuade your readers, because you are preparing an argumentative speech. But what did so many of you do? You just read it as though those lines come from regular paragraphs. Anyway, that's your performance task. I'll just have to give those classmates of yours the lowest score in the rubric. I mean, what can I do? It's expected. I mean, what would you expect? You read it poorly. Would you expect a good grade, a good score? No. Last time, for Sonnet 29, no, before, for the previous poetry reading activities, the rubric ended with 20 as the lowest score. 20 was the lowest score. Therefore, others who read the material poorly got a score of 20 over 30 because that's the lowest that's found in the rubric. This time, for Sonnet 29, I'll adjust the rubric to make it, I'll do my best to make it count as 0 to be the lowest for poetry reading. That if someone reads it poorly and that person insists, sir, just let that material be scored. I will not do it and do it again because I'm giving you the chance to redo it, sir. But if that student would say, sir, I'll just not redo my selections, I'll just not redo the reading of the poem, sir, then I'll give it a 0 over 30 if it's really poorly done. And that's fair enough. Plus, this is not the first time that you're doing poetry reading. So allow me to do the selections reading, but then, like what I said earlier, this is not necessarily the only way to do the reading of Sonnet 29. Whatever your style is, just be sure to properly project yourselves, your face, your voice, and if you can add in some gestures, then do so. Sonnet 29 by George Santayana. What riches have you that you deem me poor? Or what large comfort that you call me sad? Tell me, what makes you so exceeding glad? Is your earth happy or your heaven sure? I hope for heaven, since the stars endure and bring such tidings as our fathers had. I know no deeper doubt to make me mad. I need no brighter love to keep me pure. To me, the faiths of old are daily bread. I bless their hope. I bless their will to say, and my deep heart still meaneth what they said. It makes me happy that soul is brave, and being so much kinsman to the dead, I walk contented to the peopled grave. So that's Sonnet 29 by George Santayana. We go now to what a sonnet is. Sonnets, to begin with, are not free poems. They're not free because they follow particular characteristics. You have there the characteristics of a sonnet. First, what makes a sonnet really particular is in terms of the number of lines, the total number of lines found in the selection. In here, in a sonnet of whatever type it may be, there needs to be 14 lines, maximum and minimum. It cannot go beyond that. It's not also right to say, sir, I'm trying to do a modern sonnet where I'm adding a line. No. I'm trying to modify the sonnets of old, sir. That is why I'm trying to reduce or change the number of lines. No, you cannot do that because sonnets remain to be not free selections. There are 14 lines. And there are also restrictions in each line. That's a bigger problem. Sorry, let's not call it a problem. The restrictions in each line are just probably guides on how to arrive at what we call the complete sonnet. The hair of Kent reminds me of his hair back when he was in elementary. Kent, please turn your camera on. That was the kind of hair that you had when you were in elementary. That's your hair.
Wait, sir, wait, sir.
That you looked better there, Kim, compared to the hair that you had before, the long hair. And that's the to those who were classmates of Kim Williser back in elementary, tell me not that's not his hair. That's how he looked like. The Kim Williser who would just keep on running in the playground, who in the afternoon would make his uniform turn from white to brown after having sweat out so much. Anyway, kid, you're not alone. Jacob also had that experience. What are the restrictions in a line for a sonnet? There just needs to be 10 syllables. Well, just imagine this. When you create a sonnet, each line is restricted, limited to only 10 syllables. You cannot go beyond that. You cannot also go for fewer syllables than that. However, the trend, especially of modern poetry writing, is to add one more syllable to each line. Sometimes sonnets could have, of the modern practice, there are modern sonnets that tend to have 11 lines instead of 10. In fact, you could also find one with 9 syllables instead of 10. But still, these modern sonnets have kept the integrity of having 14 lines in the totality of the selection. So again, sonnets need to have 14 lines. Second, the sonnets need to have 10 syllables in each line. In terms of the syllables found in the line, you need to be reminded now of the rhythmical pattern. Familiar of this term in literature, rhythmical pattern? Have you encountered this grade when you were in grade 7 or in grade 8? Encountered terms like iamb, trochee, anapest, dactyl, spondy, familiar? I don't know. I can't gauge your reactions. Because if they are familiar, we can just proceed iambic, just with the iambic structure. So it's like this. The rhythmical pattern of every line is composed of two elements. You have meter and foot. So this one is not anymore found in the module. For the meter element, this, by the way, things like this exist in your Filipino subject. You term them as sukat. I don't know how to term foot. Meter is sukat. So we have meter and foot. For the meter part, this is where you just simply need to add in prefixes. Like if there are 4 meters in a line, you call it a tetrameter. If there are 5 meters in a line, pentameter. If there are 6 groups or meters in a line, you call it hexameter. It's just a matter of using the prefixes for meters. If there are 3, how do you call the meter? If there are 3, how do you call it? What's the prefix for 3? It's Kim. What's the prefix for? How do you call the meter, Kim, if there are 3 meters only or 3 groups? Three. Tri. It's correct. It's trimeter. Tetra is for 4. That's why Juice is called a tetra pak because there are four sides. If there are just two meters or two groups of syllables, you don't call it bimeter, ha? You call it dimeter. And if there are seven, heptameter, but it's quite rare now to find an octometer or a nonameter or a decameter, even a heptameter. Sometimes lines in poetry will just end with a hexameter. Longest would probably be a heptameter. That's for the meter part. Let's go for the foot. There are, never mind the spondy because the spondy is uh, more complex than the other four. Let's go with the iamb, the trochee, the anapest, and the dactyl. We start with the iamb. The iambic foot tells you that there are two syllables in one group arranged this way. Ano, the foot, sorry. The foot element in rhythmical patterns pertains to the stressing and unstressing of syllables. Like what syllable is unstressed, what syllable is stressed in a group of syllables. For the iamb and the trochee, two syllables are involved. For the anapest and the dactyl, three syllables are involved. I hope you know how to spell these terms. Does everybody know how to spell the words iamb, trochee? King, please spell trochee for me, King. Hello, King.
I don't know, sir.
That's why I asked if everybody people, if you do not know, say it so that it can, because when you did not react earlier about the spelling, you gave me the impression that everybody knew how it's going to be spelled. You just have to be honest. Imagine if this comes out in the QE or in the ST and then your spelling was actually wrong. And then you'll blame the teacher, sir, because you didn't share to us the spelling of the term. Because you didn't also tell me that you didn't know how to spell it. Why did I assume that you know already the spelling of the word? Because foot is a lesson in grade 7 literature that's supposed to be introduced back when you were in grade 7. So it's safe for me to assume that the spelling of these terms was already familiar to you. Oh, Jacob, how do you spell trochee, Jacob?
Trouche. I forgot, sir.
You might as well want to spell trachea, Jacob. Be. Ken, how do you spell trochee, Ken?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, trochee. People, spell. Oh, you missed spelling so much. You're giving me the feels that you missed our spelling activity so much. What do you want me to say? Spell appoggiatura. Spell disestablishmentarianism. Ay. Kathy, spell trochee.
Troche.
Vem, let's spell trochee, Vem.
I'm not sure, sir, but I think it's Trochae.
Al, spell trochee, Al. Wait. So
T
far, no one has given the correct spelling of the term. I think Al was so quick to search for this on Google.
Troucha A E
How many vowels are
Y.
you adding? There's a Y. Now there's a letter Y. See what I meant, people? Earlier, I really asked, does everybody know the spelling of these terms? No one reacted. No one reacted. But now that I ask you to spell the word choke, Kim, please spell choke.
Ano sir, I think it's Trocchee.
Chee. That's
Yeah.
choke. Yeah.
Thee.
Trocchee. Though there are two letter E's, we read that as choke. At some point, I read it before as troshi. I have to be honest, I read it before as troshi because of words like meat and then feet. You don't read it as mate, fate. My fate hurt. You don't say that. So I really read it before as troshi. Then I realized it was to be read as choke. So that the I am and the choke have two syllables involved. But in terms of how the stress marks are placed, for the I am, please take note of this. For the I am, the first syllable is unstressed, while the second syllable is stressed. In literature, we use symbols for them. Two basic symbols used for the foot would be the U. The U, this symbol represents an unstressed syllable, while that symbol, I don't know how to call it. It looks like a diagonal small line, a small diagonal line. The small diagonal line represents the stress. Others use an apostrophe. Kim was doing this gesture. Others use the apostrophe in lieu of this mark to represent the stressed syllable. Again, for the I am, the first syllable is unstressed, while the second syllable is stressed. The opposite is for the trochee. For the trochee, the first syllable is stressed, while the second syllable is unstressed. Let's go to the anapest and the dactyl. For the anapest, there are three syllables involved. The first two syllables are unstressed, while the third syllable is stressed. For the dactyl, the first syllable is stressed, while the remaining two syllables, the second and the third syllables, are unstressed. See the pattern? See the differences? And now, we are reminded that a line in a sonnet, each line in a sonnet follows a rhythmical pattern known as an iambic pentameter. Why is it known as an iambic pentameter? So let's try to dissect one line. Each line is composed of 10 syllables. Since it's an iamb, two syllables are grouped. So how many groups do we have in total? We have 5. Since there are 5 groups of 2 syllables, 5 groups composed of 2 syllables in each group, you'll have a pentameter. And where will the stress be for each syllable? For each meter? It will be on the second syllable. The first syllable in each meter is unstressed. That is why the first line will not supposedly be read as what riches, but what riches. It will not be read as what riches. Because the first syllable for what is supposed to be unstressed. While the first, let's examine Sonnet 29's first line. Bring your attention to the first line, which is, what riches have you that you deem me poor? What will be our first group of syllables in that line? Kim, what's the first group of syllables?
I think it's what riches, sir.
First group, two
What
syllables only,
riches?
man.
I joke.
What rich?
What rich?
What rich? Try to do this in your respective copies, people. Try to dissect them. You can use a bar to separate one pair of syllables from another pair. So once you have identified two syllables, put a bar, identify two other syllables, put another bar, another two syllables, then another bar. So our first group will be what rich. What's the next group of syllables, Jacob?
S have.
Is have. Second group of syllables, Ken.
You that.
You that. Next group, Kathy, will be
You deem.
you deem. And then the last one is obviously me poor. It does not mean that when the first syllable is unstressed and the second syllable is stressed, you'll really read it as, what riches have you that you deem me poor? When you do your practice later on, for sure, you'll probably be doing this. Or you'll be doing this with your fingers. What riches have you that you deem me poor? At least it's just with the fingers. And then this actually happened when I gave an exam that's like this in the regular setup before. Students in class were, almost all of them were actually doing this. What riches have you that you me? And then when it came out in a quarterly exam, it came to be noisy in that classroom, because the grade 8 or the high school students at that in that classroom who took an exam in with sonnets could not help but voice out the lines, because it's different if you read the lines in your mind than to really listen to them. So there were a lot of other high schoolers who got irritated while listening to those, trying to really read out the lines. So sooner or later, when you practice to do poetry reading of this, you'll probably be doing any of them. You'll do this, or you'll do this. But that's not what I'm demanding. You don't need to sound like machines. You can, of course, read it as, what riches have you that you deem me poor? Diba? There are significant words emphasized on the second syllable, like the word poor, deem. You don't have to sound robotic, that you really go with unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress. No. Anyway, that's for you to really discover later on. And then you can do that kind of dissection in the rest of the lines until you reach, I walk contented to the peopled grave. See, to the peopled grave. Peep, because the last two pairs of syllables are the peopled grave. Thus, the iambic pentameter. Lastly, last one important characteristic of a sonnet is that there is a rhyme scheme. What is again a rhyme? It's just a matter of similarity of sounds at the end of each line or between lines. When you talk about sonnets, we are after of terminal rhyme to determine the rhyme scheme. What is a rhyme scheme? It is a pattern of rhyme found in a group of lines. In a sonnet, the rhyme scheme is to be established. But of course, the rhyme scheme depends now on the type of sonnet that you are actually encountering. This brings us now to the two main types of sonnets. Two main types of sonnets. The first one is called the English sonnet, or then attributed to the great William Shakespeare. And for that, English sonnets have also been named as Shakespearean sonnets. If you find a sonnet, because when you find sonnets from books, from the internet, so many of them have not been given a distinct title. If you find a sonnet with a title equivalent to the first line of that sonnet, most probably that sonnet was created by William Shakespeare. If not, that sonnet is is an English sonnet. For instance, you have How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways by Elizabeth Browning. How Do I Count Thee, Let Me Love the Ways is the title of the sonnet. At the same time, it's also the first line. Look at the title. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. 10 syllables. First line of the sonnet. Also the title of the sonnet. Shakespearean or English is also its type. A Shakespearean sonnet follows this rhyme scheme. A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. This rhyme scheme tells you that the Shakespearean or English sonnet groups the 14 lines into 3 quatrains and 1 couplet. A stanza composed of 4 lines is what you call a quatrain. And since there are 3 quatrains in an English sonnet, you'll need to have a couplet to complete the 14 lines. A couplet is a verse composed of 2 lines. So for English or Shakespearean sonnets, the rhyme scheme exists according to each quatrain. Like for the first quatrain, 2 sounds come out. You have A, B, A, B. For the second quatrain, another set of 2 distinct sounds come out, C, D, C, D. And you have another set of distinct sounds for the third quatrain, E, F, E, F, and 1 distinct sound for the couplet represented by 1 letter, and that's G. Each letter there in the rhyme scheme corresponds to a sound. For instance, if the last word of the first quatrain is bad, the third line, if the first line of the first quatrain ends with bad, the third line of that same quatrain is supposed to end with a word that rhymes with bad. Like for instance, first line bad, third line mad. Second line good, third line would. A fourth line would. So, oh my God. The first and the third lines rhyme. The fourth and the second lines also rhyme. And that's the end for the first quatrain. The second quatrain will have its distinct sound, meaning the words in the second quatrain must not rhyme with the words in the first quatrain. So look at how strict the making is of a sonnet. Imagine if that's what I asked you to do for the performance task. And then I asked you to make like 3 or 4 of them. No, I think, we can give that as an assignment. Why not? That's for the Shakespearean sonnets rhyme scheme. In terms of content, just like any poem out there, sonnets contain ideas. In a Shakespearean or English sonnet, the content comes from the completeness of the selection, which means that you'll have to understand the selection in its entirety, not that you'll have to identify messages or ideas in segments. The idea comes from the totality of the text. We go now to the second type of sonnet, known as the Italian sonnet, or has been made popular by an Italian writer named Francesco Petrarch. Take note, it's Francesco. So do not spell it with an I, because with an I, you'll need that as Francisco. But the writer is Italian, so you name him as Francesco, and his name is with an E. It's capital letter Francesco. Petrarch, capital letter Petrarch. That is why the sonnet is named Petrarchan sonnet. Sometimes you'll find the Italian sonnet to be named as a Sicilian sonnet. Sicily is found in Italy. You have also a Miltonian sonnet, a sonnet named after John Milton, who also popularized his own set of Italian sonnets. But among all names, you have the Italian sonnet, which has been popularly substituted by another term, which is a Petrarchan sonnet. Let's look at the rhyme scheme of a Petrarchan sonnet. The rhyme scheme is A, B, B, A, B, B, A. And as said, that rhyme scheme exists for the octave. What is an octave? An octave is a verse or a stanza composed of 8 lines. So that's how the Italian sonnet will be dissected. You'll examine it in terms of the rhyme scheme. You'll divide the 14 lines into 2. The first 8 will be named as the octave. The remaining 6 lines, which are termed sestet, will have a varied rhyme scheme. What does that mean? Even if your octave is at ABBA, ABBA, the sestet may be CDE, CDE, or CCDD, EE, or CED, CED, or CCC, DDD, or CDCDEE, or CDE, CD, or there's just an infinite number of ways to do the variation in the sestet. What's important is the fixed rhyme scheme that's found in the octave. Again, rhyme scheme for a Petrarchan or Italian sonnet, octave is ABBA, ABBA, sestet is varied. But of course, by the time that will have to be asked from you in an exam, because it will only come out like in the QE. Your QE is already done. I already made your QE. There's a part there where you have to read a sonnet, not a sonnet. There's a part there where you'll have to read sonnets. If you're asked to provide the rhyme scheme of a Petrarchan sonnet, you'll have to represent the sound with letters. That's for the rhyme scheme. What about the content? If in the Italian or if in the Shakespearean or English sonnet, the content comes out from the totality or completeness of the text, in a Petrarchan or Italian sonnet, the content depends on whatever is found in the octave and on the sestet. The octave presents the problem, the sestet presents the solution. Petrarchan sonnets or Italian sonnets work in that format, that the first 8 lines should show a problem and that the remaining 6 lines should answer that problem, provide a solution to that problem. This is where the selection from last time on his blindness, the one that I mentioned, comes back as a good example. For instance, you go into Honest Blindness by John Milton. The first 8 lines talk of his experience of losing sight, the problem of becoming blind. If you examine the 8 lines, in the entirety of the 8 lines, you'll be told there that we have a persona, John Milton himself, who expressed his experience of eventually losing his sight. He is declaring that he is becoming blind. And of course, logic would tell you that that poses a problem. So what solution did he place? What solution can be found in the remaining 6 lines in the sestet? In the remaining 6 lines, John Milton declared that that situation is something that he cannot anymore stop from occurring. But that did not mean that his life, that he will choose to end living his life. He is then relying on a divine being to continue guide him in his life despite losing his sight. That even if he loses his physical capacity to see things, his faith would allow him to continue seeing the beauty of the world. So you have that solution provided by John Milton. Let's examine Sonnet 29 of George Santayana. Is it Shakespearean or Petrarca? In terms of the number of lines, we can forget that. In terms of the number, the rhythmical pattern, we can put that aside. We can bring our attention to know the nature of the sonnet. First thing, look at the rhyme scheme. Look at the rhyme scheme. So you look at the word at the end of each line. You have the word poor. The word poor rhymes with what words rhyme with poor here? Trixley. Trixley? I can't hear anything, Trixley. Trixley, you're on mute. What word rhymes with poor, Trixley? Why can't Trixley? Huh, wait, I can now rearrange you. Does your Zoom account allow you to rearrange people in your frame? I can. I can actually move you from. Look, I think this is recorded on video. I am moving people. I think this helps so that during the debate later on, I can just put debaters close. Like if you belong to that side, I can put you close to each other. Like if I put Kathy, Vem, and Jacob in one column, that means that the 3 of them are in the government side. If I put Chelsea, Ken, and Kim in another column on this side, that means that they also belong to one side. They're in the opposition. I can move people around already. Trixley, what words rhyme with poor? Well, I don't know. Can anybody hear Trixley? I can. Jacob, let's go with Jacob. Trixley, try to fix your audio there for a while.
Sure.
Sure, what else?
Endure.
Endure and
Pure.
pure. They share an imperfect kind of
Hello?
rhyme because of the part, the part. And what sound, what letter does the sound, sorry, what letter can we use to represent that sound? You have the letter A. Let's go with the word sad. What words rhyme with sad in that poem? Chelsea.
Glad.
Glad. What else?
Had.
Had. What else?
Mad.
Mad. So you now have a rhyme scheme for the first 8 lines. What's the rhyme scheme? Kathy. What's the rhyme scheme, Kathy, for the octave? Hello, Kath. Hello. Oh my. I'm back. I'm back. I disappeared for a few moments there. Kathy, what's the rhyme scheme for the octave?
A B B A B B A, sir.
Correct. That right away tells you that the sonnet is, what is the nature of our sonnet? English or Italian? Jacob.
Italian Sonnet.
Italian sonnet. And of course, when you explore the sestet of that sonnet, you'll find that that also has its own rhyme scheme. But automatically, you've been told by the first 8 lines that the sonnet is Italian. Knowing that it's Italian, in terms of content, you should be reminded that you'll have to identify the problem in the first 8 lines and the solution in the remaining 6 lines. For Sonnet 29 by George Santayana, the problem is about a question of him being allegedly labeled as poor. We have here a persona who wanted to believe that he is not poor, but the problem is there is a challenge to prove that he is. He is not. There is an accusation that he is poor, yet he wants to prove that he's not. If you go to the solution, the clear proof that he stated there is that feeling of being contented. That according to our persona, he is not poor at all because he walks with contentment. That for as long as he feels satisfied of what he has, that for as long as his soul is happy and brave, he will not identify himself as someone who is poor. So that's George Santayana's Sonnet 29. On Thursday, people, we will do poetry reading after answering the FTs or checking the FTs found in the module. There are only 14 lines here, so I think we'll be able to cover as many persons as we can for poetry reading. For this afternoon, I bid you good luck and God bless for the debate round. Goodbye and thank you, grade 9.
Goodbye and thank you, sir.
By the way, for the students who submitted their poetry reading, I really appreciated, though it's not something that I required, I really appreciated those students who still did a bow in front of the camera. Like they really did. Like in front of the camera, let's assume that it's Sonnet 29. Sonnet 29. Or after saying the line, I walk contented to the peopled grave. And then they would smile in front of the camera. And then they still bowed. Thank you. So, thank you for going beyond what the activity demands. You're really not disappointing me. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think others will do it that way now. If it comes out, then for sure, you are just trying to copy what I just said. Okay, goodbye and thank you now. I'll now end the call.